Welcome to Rauta's opinion video. Today I'm gonna talk a little bit about politics and metal music. These two are the topics that many people try to avoid putting together. Many people actually manage to do it quite well, but also many people think it's important to recognize the bond between, and also for many bands it's important to spread the message or ideology, for so to speak, when it's about metal music or music in general. Now, to start all this babble of mine, I could actually start mentioning the recent Ministry video called Antifa. As some of you might already have noticed, Ministry being the kind of a prominent, leading and infamous industrial metal or industrial rock in some sense name, and Ministry has always been quite strong with its messages, and this new video track called Antifa is definitely one of their most memorable ones, most kind of a biggest impact ones, and definitely one of the strongest message. The big question, however, that was around of this video, given the lyrics and the graphic content of the video, is that how does Ministry or Mr. Alex Jorgensen feel about this Antifa when it comes to the lyrics. You will most likely watch the video between or after this babble of mine. At least I strongly advise you to do that, and try googling for those lyrics if you want to get deeper into the idea of this video. So why I'm talking about this video a little bit is that there's a strong kind of message about Antifa in that video, and very strong sense of politics in that video. And like I said, Ministry has never been afraid to bring hot topics or strong opinions to their music. Ministry is now, however, a typical metal band, so it's not the thing we are going into. But let's talk about politics and metal. Now, there are lots of bands that would like to get as far as possible from politics in general, as far as it goes to having a metal music band and the lyrics and all that stuff. Now, some people also claim that whatever you do in life, whatever you speak, it's all political. Now, this is a philosophical debate which I don't think we have any point to steer the conversation to. So let's just pick the obvious ones from the world of metal music. Now, most of these genres in metal music, as you mostly know, are not political sense in any way. Be it heavy metals, dragons and swords, or high fantasy stories, they are hardly political at all. Now, if we take a look at, let's say, death metal's typical lyrics or cover images or whatever, you hardly find anything political there. Surely lots of gore, violence, murder, death and so forth, but mostly kind of fantasy stories. And even if you read these interviews by these bands or read the lyrics or get to know these bands, they are very, very rarely political at all. Now, there are some genres, obviously, which are a little bit more political, but maybe don't take so much sides in the terms of politics. Let's say thrash metal. While many thrash metal bands, such as Slayer, for example, have topics about which could be seen as a religion-related or Death and War and stuff like that, they are hardly political as such. Sometimes, obviously, they might be like anti-war, anti-religion, uh, pro-liberal thinking, or whatever, or they might be just questioning the um, status of society or cultures or just individual people even. But most of them hardly political as such. Thrash metal, however, is in many bands one of the most political genres of music, but in kind of a easy way. Let's just a little bit criticize this and that, be it poverty, unemployment, presidential candidates, politicians even, but usually not much more than that. Now, black metal, obviously, most of them are apolitical as can be it Satanism or Satan worshipping or even deep kind of religious stuff or even irreligious stuff, kind of like anti-religious or anti-Christian, anti-Islam, anti-Jewish or whatever. Hardly political as such, but more related to principles or ideologies of a political sort. Now, obviously, there are lots and lots. These are all very subjective matters. But there are, of course, those bands which have a strong political message, especially in black metal, and usually these are under the label of NSBM, meaning, you already guessed it, National Socialist Black Metal. So these bands are true to their cause and they act for real, but in terms of numbers and even with those lyrics, with these kind of a right-wing political bands, it's not that common, even though some people try to make this marginal monster look a little bit bigger and way more terrifying. Now, there are also, of course, genres which are more on the left side of politics. Usually, you can get this kind of feeling from bands operating in the field of grindcore, for example. Be it about vegetarian stuff or just left-wing political stuff, animal rights stuff, etc. Not always so political like, I don't know, vegetarian food, for example, or animal rights. Not so straight to the point political, but clearly some opinions that want to be taken out, and usually they are related to sort of political message or ideology. And of course, when we take these extreme cases on the table, it's clear that these bands on the right and the bands on the left, they are usually kind of like opposing each other, which is no wonder. So, for example, like I had this Death Toll 80K mini CD recently here for review. There was like these gay Nazis, like so anti-Nazis or whatever, kind of logo on the back of the CD. So it's kind of clear of what kind of message they are all about. And also, then again, there are these right-wing bands, which obviously are usually anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Christian, anti-Muslim, and sometimes also clearly kind of a, white pride or white supremacy or stuff like that. So clearly right-wing and left-wing are both present there. And of course they are against each other, basically wanted to kick each other's in the butt and maybe even more. But like I said, most bands have no political agenda. For example, when I did the interview with Cut Up, the Swedish death metal band, in the last Steelfest 2017, They kind of went, felt like awkward when I was asking should or would they have something about politics to say? Do they have anything to do with political agenda or whatever? And this is kind of interesting because not only they felt like a little bit cornered there and maybe weird me asking such a thing because I'm not a political person per se, but it's just something that it's nice to ask people like, what do you think about this and that, or does it even concern you? Some people just like, well, shrug. I don't care. It doesn't really move me. But some people are like, even like, oh man, I just don't want to touch the topic. It just makes my headache, and I don't want to get into trouble. So they're kind of like a cautious in a way, trying to stay away from all this possible labeling, even if they had opinion about, I don't know, refugees or people in politics or this and that. Many people just want to avoid the topic once and for all, just to be clear. And also because they don't want to be labeled, their band, labeling their band versus their individual persons. For example, earlier this week, I watched a Norwegian documentary movie called Black Heart. Now, this movie was supposed to be, I'm a bit of trailing here, but you'll get back to my meaning in a second. So this documentary was about these so-called blackpackers. So basically people wanting to see Norwegian black metal and thus traveling to Norway for a reason, do a gig or just, see places of interest related to black metal and blah, blah, blah. Now there was this Greek band called Nar Mataron, which already has been kind of labeled as NSBM band. And the thing is that only the one guy in the band is related to politics, but only in his private life, not related to the band. And this was basically underlined a couple of times in the documentary alone. But also there was this case in Finland, and which I'm gonna back into the second episode of this politics and metal idea. There was one gig which were kind of protested because one guy in that band has a civil life connection to politics. So even that kind of personal opinions of a person can affect as much as to label the whole band to be NSBM band, for example, or I guess the same could be said about left-wing stuff. For example, when we interviewed Rotten Sound, the Finnish grindcore band in Tuska 2017, Mr. main vocalist Keijo, it was clearly about being a left-wing person, and I just have to take my hat off, because being honest about it and not be afraid to talk about it. So there's clear distinction between these bands that are trying to be political and be honest about it and being straight about it, and then these bands which are by no means a political, but even kind of like feeling awkward or kind of hurt even when you ask them about such a question. So we kind of live in a world where these kind of questions make people to take their step back and like, hey man, I don't want to touch the fucking subject because I don't want to be labeled. So it's so kind of a touchy-feely thing nowadays, even in metal music, that bands or individual persons are kind of afraid. Then there are bands like Brujeria from Mexico, kind of an international lineup, but anyway, and they have been very active with like anti-Trump thing, kind of like an anti-Republican thing. Not so much about right-wing or left-wing thingy, but just kind of like an anti-Trump and anti-Republican. If you take a look at their lyrics or listen to themselves, that is, if you speak Spanish, The message is quite clear. And if you take a look at our interview with Brujeria, for example, it is, you know, there's no question about it how these guys feel about Trump and whatever. But these kind of bands are not very typical. Sure, there are bands like Rage Against the Machine or Wars, that kind of band, which had strong opinions and so forth. But most of those bands are not very typical, and if they are the bigger names, they kind of cannot even afford being that. Maybe they could, but usually they don't. Sure, bands like Iron Maiden or Metallica have had their share of kind of opinions about this and that, be it about war or death sentence and stuff. But like I said, these are more like society-related topics instead of being outright political opinions or views. So politics and metal, surely have this kind of bond between. But even with such movements such as Antifa, there are no, how to put it, majority of metal is not political per se. And even still, some people, some individuals, maybe someone, I don't know, organization level, try to kind of stamp people, kind of label them like, okay, you had this kind of rune on your logo, so you will be Nazi. Oh, you preach about being a vegan, you're left wing, or stuff like that. Even me, as a person who is a political person, I have already heard that I'm both left wing and right wing. Some people have, of course, made jokes about my lack of haircut, so to speak, that I must be this and that because of that. These kind of claims are ridiculous, they're outrageous, but that's the world we're living in. Some people just fancy so much this kind of black and white boxing that if you're not with us, you're against us, which kind of makes no sense, does it? For example, if you don't have kids, are you anti-kid? If you don't go to army, are you anti-army? You get the idea. It usually makes no sense. Of course, it makes sense if you're like, let's say, straight to the point, right-wing dude. Then you are obviously anti-left, because that's how this kind of politics works. But that either isn't exactly, or neither, that isn't exactly that simple, really. And I think that's one of the reasons why many bands just try to be as far as possible from politics, especially in terms of music, because getting this kind of label is kind of demands a lot of work for you to, wash yourself clean from this kind of label. And it doesn't even mean that you have kind of deserved it. So it's much of a smear campaign as much as it can be just like a poorly timed joke. Say something politically incorrect and boom, you might be labeled for life. And this is just exactly what kind of world we live in. For example, Myrkur, which I already made an opinion video a couple of months ago or so, even the main woman in the band, who is basically the Myrkur band, was labeled kind of a anti-Muslim or xenophobic because she said something about people invading Europe. So as you can guess, and you can actually Google it up if you want to, or check out my beautiful video. So as you can guess, this kind of labeling and smearing is kind of so easy nowadays. basically anybody with any level of influence can basically say this and that. And it's not like he or she gets to be the scapegoat, but the person in question kind of has to, try to explain his or her way out from this kind of labeling. So no wonder why bands exactly want to stay as far as possible from this kind of labeling, even though it should make no sense in terms of being a country of justice, where people are innocent until otherwise proven, proven guilty, that is. But this is the world we live in. So, politics and metal, a tough cookie to crack, a tough cookie to kind of swallow. And if you happen to do so, then you are most likely labeled for life. Now, I hope to get more into the more extreme stuff in the next episode of Metal and Politics, but I hope you get the idea of the very basics of what's going on here. Thank you for watching. Should you have any comments, disagreements, agreements, or just whatever, please let me know in the comment fields below. If you liked the video, subscribe. If you didn't, do it anyway, just because you want to see and hear more of my babble in the future as well. Maybe you don't, I don't care. But be back soon if you liked, and as always, stay metal, stay brutal, and keep being Rauta.